Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Our first story is titled,
Parents tried to force me into an unwanted career, leaving me estranged. I'm Matthew, and this is the story of how my parents' obsession with my career choice tore our family apart and led me down a challenging yet ultimately fulfilling path. Growing up, I was always a creative kid. I loved drawing, painting, and anything that allowed me to express myself artistically. My room was covered in sketches and half-finished canvases. Art was my escape, my passion, and the one thing that truly made me feel alive. But my parents, especially my dad, had other plans for me. They were both successful lawyers, partners at a prestigious firm in the city. From the moment I could talk, they'd been grooming me to follow in their footsteps. "Matthew, you're so smart," my mom would say. "You'd make an amazing lawyer someday." "Son, just think of the security, the prestige," my dad would chime in. "Being a lawyer is like the key to a successful life." At first, I didn't think much of it. What kid doesn't hear their parents projecting their own dreams onto them? But as I got older, their expectations became more intense, more suffocating. When I was in high school, I remember showing my mom a painting I was particularly proud of. It was a landscape of the park near our house with vibrant autumn colors and a serene lake reflecting the sky. I'd spent weeks perfecting it. "That's nice, honey," she said, barely glancing at it. "But shouldn't you be studying for your debate club? The mock trial is coming up soon." My heart sank. I'd hoped for just a moment of genuine interest or pride in my artwork. But it was clear that anything not related to law was seen as a distraction. Despite their pressure, I clung to my love of art throughout high school. I took every art class available, joined the art club, and even won a few local competitions. But with each achievement in the art world, my parents' disapproval grew. The real breaking point came during my senior year. It was time to start applying for colleges, and I knew exactly where I wanted to go. The prestigious Rhode Island School of Design, RISD. Their fine arts program was renowned, and I'd been working on my portfolio for months. When I told my parents about my plans, you'd think I'd announced I was joining a cult. "Absolutely not," my dad thundered. "No child of mine is going to waste their potential on some starving artist fantasy." "But Dad," I protested, "RISD is one of the best art schools in the country. This could be my chance to really make something of my art." My mom tried to play peacemaker, but I could see she was firmly on Dad's side. "Honey, we just want what's best for you. Art is a lovely hobby, but it's not a real career. Why don't we look at some good pre-law programs instead?" I was crushed. I'd known they wouldn't be thrilled, but I'd hoped they'd at least be willing to consider it. Instead, they made it clear that law school was the only acceptable path. The next few months were a battlefield. Every conversation turned into an argument about my future. They refused to even look at my RISD application, let alone help me with the tuition. Instead, they pushed brochures for Ivy League schools in my face at every opportunity. "Harvard has an excellent art history program," my mom would say, as if that was some sort of compromise. "You could minor in it while focusing on pre-law." I felt like I was suffocating. The thought of spending the next 7 years studying something I had zero passion for made me physically ill, but the pressure was relentless. Finally, worn down by their constant nagging and threats to cut me off financially, I gave in. I applied to their choice of schools, focusing on places with strong pre-law programs. When the acceptance letters came in, my parents were over the moon. I, on the other hand, felt like I was watching my dream slip away. I ended up at Yale, my dad's alma mater. He was so proud, telling everyone who would listen about his son following in his footsteps. I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the dutiful son. But inside, I was screaming. The first year was hell. I threw myself into my studies, determined to at least excel if I had to be there. But every class, every textbook, every mock debate felt like a betrayal of who I really was. I joined the campus art club, but between the heavy course load and my parents' constant check-ins, I barely had time to pick up a pencil, let alone paint. I fell into a deep depression. My grades were good, but I was miserable. I lost weight, rarely left my dorm room except for classes, and stopped calling home unless absolutely necessary. When I did talk to my parents, our conversations were strained and superficial. "How are your classes going?" my mom would ask. "Fine," I replied, not bothering to elaborate. "That's great, son," my dad would say. "Keep up the good work. Before you know it, you'll be applying to law schools." The thought made me want to vomit. It was during my sophomore year that I hit rock bottom. I was sitting in a constitutional law lecture, staring blankly at the professor, when suddenly I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing, my palms were sweaty, and the room started spinning. I stumbled out of the lecture hall and collapsed in the hallway, gasping for air. A classmate found me and called campus health services. It turned out I was having a full-blown panic attack. The doctor who examined me was concerned. "Matthew, have you been under a lot of stress lately?" she asked gently. I broke down and told her everything about my love for art, my parents' pressure, how miserable I was pursuing a career I hated. She listened without judgment, then gave me some advice that would change my life. "Matthew, you're an adult now. You have to live your life for yourself, not for your parents. If this path is making you this unhappy, it's time to make a change." Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. She was right. I was an adult. I didn't have to live my life to please my parents. It was time to take control. The next day, I marched into the registrar's office and changed my major to fine arts. I then went back to my dorm and applied to transfer to RISD for the following year. My hands were shaking as I submitted the application, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Telling my parents was the hardest part. I decided to do it over the phone, partly because I was across the country, but mostly because I was afraid I'd lose my nerve if I had to face them in person. The call went about as well as you'd expect. "You did what?" my dad roared when I told him I changed my major. "I changed to fine arts, Dad," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I've applied to transfer to RISD next year." "This is unacceptable," he shouted. "We didn't send you to Yale to waste your time on finger painting. You change it back right now, or so help me." "No, Dad," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "I'm not changing it back. This is my life, and I'm going to live it the way I want." "If you do this, you're on your own," he threatened. "Don't expect another penny from us." I took a deep breath. "I understand. I'm sorry you feel that way, but my decision is final." I could hear my mom crying in the background as my dad slammed down the phone. The next few months were tough. True to their word, my parents cut me off financially. I had to scramble to find scholarships and take out loans to cover my tuition and living expenses. I got a part-time job at a local art supply store to make ends meet. It was stressful, but every time I picked up a paintbrush, I knew I'd made the right choice. My parents didn't speak to me for months. They didn't show up when I moved out of Yale, and they didn't call to wish me luck when I started at RISD. It hurt, but I threw myself into my new life, determined to make the most of this opportunity. RISD was everything I'd dreamed of and more. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who understood and appreciated art the way I did. My professors praised my work and pushed me to improve. I made friends who shared my passion, who could spend hours discussing color theory or debating the merits of different painting techniques. I flourished in this environment. My art evolved and improved by leaps and bounds. I started entering competitions again, and to my amazement, I began to win. first local contests, then regional ones. By my senior year, I'd gained a reputation as one of the most promising young artists in the program. But despite my success at RISD, the estrangement from my family cast a long shadow over my achievements. Every triumph felt bittersweet without my parents to share it with. I'd see my classmates excitedly calling home after a successful critique or exhibition, and the loneliness would hit me like a physical blow. I tried reaching out a few times over the years. I'd send an email with photos of my latest work or a brief update on my life. The responses, when they came at all, were terse and formal. It was clear that while they weren't actively hostile anymore, they still couldn't accept my choice. As graduation approached, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was about to embark on a career as an artist with no safety net, no family support, and a mountain of student loan debt. The excitement of following my passion was tempered by a gnawing anxiety about my future. My senior showcase was a pivotal moment. I poured everything I had into my final collection, a series of large-scale mixed media pieces, exploring themes of identity, belonging, and the tension between individual dreams and familial expectations. It was deeply personal work, raw and honest in a way I'd never allowed myself to do before. The opening night was a blur of nerves and adrenaline. As I stood in the gallery surrounded by my work and fielding questions from visitors, I kept glancing at the door, hoping against hope that my parents might show up. They didn't, of course, but a few local artists and gallery owners did express interest in my work. "You've got a unique voice," one of them told me. "It's not going to be easy, but if you keep at it, you could really make a mark in the art world." It wasn't the instant success I'd secretly hoped for, but it was enough to give me hope. As I clutched their business cards, all I could think about was how much I wished I could share this moment with my mom and dad. After graduation, I moved to New York, drawn by its vibrant art scene and the promise of opportunities. The reality, however, was far harsher than I'd anticipated. New York was expensive, competitive, and often cruel to aspiring artists. I found a tiny rundown apartment in Brooklyn that I could barely afford, sharing it with two other struggling artists. My days were a constant hustle, working part-time jobs to pay the rent while trying to carve out time for my art. I waited tables, taught art classes to kids, even did some freelance graphic design work, anything to keep a roof over my head and art supplies in my studio. The first year was particularly brutal. I was working so much just to survive that I barely had time or energy to create. When I did manage to paint, I was often too exhausted to produce anything I felt was worthwhile. The rejections piled up from galleries, from grant applications, from residency programs. Each one felt like a personal indictment, a voice whispering that maybe my parents had been right all along. There were moments of despair when I seriously considered giving up. I'd look at my mounting debt, my dwindling bank account, and wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake. The idea of crawling back to my parents, admitting defeat, and begging for a chance to go to law school, after all, crossed my mind more than once. But every time I came close to breaking, something would pull me back. A kind word from a fellow artist at a local show, a child's face lighting up in one of my art classes, the feeling of losing myself in a painting, hours slipping by unnoticed as I worked. These moments, fleeting as they were, reminded me why I'd chosen this path in the first place. Slowly, painfully slowly, things began to improve. I started to make connections in the local art community. A small gallery in Brooklyn agreed to include one of my pieces in a group show. It didn't sell, but the exposure led to a commission from a local business owner who'd seen the show. That first commission was a turning point. It wasn't much money, but it was validation, proof that someone valued my art enough to pay for it. It gave me the confidence to push harder, to take more risks with my work. I started applying to public art projects, seeing them as a way to get my work seen while also contributing to the community. After numerous rejections, I finally landed a small mural project for a community center. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. Seeing my art on display, watching people interact with it, filled me with a sense of purpose I'd never felt before. As the years passed, I slowly began to make a name for myself in the local art scene. I wasn't a star by any means, but I was building a reputation as a hardworking, socially conscious artist. I got more commissions, participated in more group shows, even had a small solo exhibition at a cafe. But financial stability remained elusive. For every step forward, there seemed to be two steps back. A big commission would come in, allowing me to pay off some debt and invest in new materials, only to be followed by months of scraping by. I was still living paycheck to paycheck, constantly juggling bills and praying my ancient laptop wouldn't give out before I could afford to replace it. The lack of financial security wore on me. I watched as friends from RISD either make it in the art world or gave up and transitioned to more stable careers. I remained stuck in a sort of limbo, too committed to my art to give up, but not successful enough to feel secure. My relationship with my family remained strained. As the years passed, the silence between us grew more entrenched. I'd hear snippets about their lives through distant relatives or mutual acquaintances. My dad made partner at his firm. My mom was involved in some high-profile cases, but to them, it was as if I had ceased to exist. The loneliness was often overwhelming. Holidays were particularly difficult. I'd see families reuniting, hear stories of parents proudly bragging about their children's accomplishments, and the ache of estrangement would hit me anew. I threw myself into volunteer work during these times, finding solace in helping others who were also alone or struggling. Despite the hardships, there was a part of me that was deeply satisfied. My art was evolving, becoming more nuanced and powerful. I was tackling complex themes, social justice, environmental issues, the human condition, in ways that resonated with people. The feedback I received from those who connected with my work was profoundly fulfilling. I started a community art program in my neighborhood, teaching free classes to underprivileged kids. Seeing their creativity blossom, watching them find their voices through art, brought me a joy I couldn't have imagined. It reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with art in the first place and reaffirmed my decision to pursue this path despite the costs. As I approached my late 20s, I found myself at a crossroads. I was gaining recognition in certain circles, but mainstream success, the kind that would provide financial stability, remained elusive. I had to seriously consider whether I could continue this way indefinitely. There were nights when the stress would overwhelm me. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, wondering if I'd make a terrible mistake. The what ifs would plague me. What if I'd listened to my parents? What if I'd chosen a more stable career? What if I'd compromised, found a middle ground? But then I'd get up the next morning, go to my makeshift studio in the corner of my living room, and lose myself in my work. The act of creation, of translating my thoughts and emotions into visual form, filled me with a sense of purpose that I knew I'd never find in a courtroom or corporate office. Now, at 28, my life is far from perfect. I'm still struggling financially, living in a small rundown apartment and juggling multiple side jobs to support my art. My relationship with my parents remained fractured, a constant source of pain and regret. But when I stand in front of a canvas, brush in hand, I feel a sense of rightness that I can't deny. My art has become my voice, my way of processing the world around me and contributing to it. It may not bring me wealth or status, but it brings me fulfillment. I've come to realize that success isn't just about financial stability or recognition. It's about staying true to yourself, pursuing your passion even when the path is difficult. My journey has been filled with hardships, but it's also been filled with moments of pure joy, deep connections, and personal growth that I wouldn't trade for any amount of money or prestige. Sometimes I imagine an alternate version of myself, the one who became a lawyer, who has a corner office and a fat bank account. That Matthew might have his parents' approval, might never worry about making rent or affording health insurance, but I don't think he'd be happy. I don't think he'd feel alive the way I do when I'm creating. So I continue on this challenging path, finding ways to make it work. I've learned to live frugally, to find joy in small things, to measure my worth not by my bank balance, but by the impact my art has on others. It's not an easy life, but it's an authentic one. And in the quiet moments when I step back and look at a finished piece, when I see the spark of creativity in a student's eyes, when I hear from someone who was moved by my work, in those moments I know I made the right choice. The road ahead may be uncertain, but I'm walking it on my own terms, brush in hand, creating the life and the art that I believe in. It's not the life my parents wanted for me, and it's not without its struggles, but it's mine, hard won and fiercely defended. And in the end, that has to be enough. Here are my thoughts about the story. I mean, who hasn't had that moment where their parents' dreams for them clash with their own passions? It's like this universal rite of passage. But Matthew's story takes it to a whole new level of intensity. I found myself getting so frustrated with Matthew's parents throughout the story. Like, come on, people, your kid is clearly talented and passionate about art. Why can't you see that? What really got to me was the way Matthew described his time at Yale. That part where he had a panic attack in the middle of the lecture, I felt that in my bones. It's like you can almost feel the suffocation, the wrongness of being in a place where you know you don't belong. It takes some serious guts to walk away from that, especially knowing that you're going to lose your parents' support. And speaking of guts, can we give Matthew a round of applause for taking that leap, changing his major, transferring to RISD, and just going all in on his dream, even though he knew it would cost him his relationship with his parents? That's some serious bravery right there. But here's the thing that really stuck with me: the aftermath of that decision. You often hear stories about people following their dreams, and it's usually all rainbows and sunshines after they make that choice. But Matthew's story feels so much more real. The struggle to make ends meet in New York, the constant hustle, the moments of doubt. It's a stark reminder that following your passion isn't always glamorous. I found myself getting emotional during the parts where Matthew talked about holidays and family events. The image of him volunteering during these times to cope with the loneliness, that hit hard. It's a side of estrangement that we don't often talk about. Those quiet moments when the absence of family is felt most keenly. But you know what? Despite all the hardships, there's something incredibly inspiring about Matthew's journey. The way he found purpose in teaching art to underprivileged kids, the satisfaction he gets from creating meaningful art. It's a powerful reminder that success isn't just about money or recognition. I'll be honest, there were moments when I was reading this where I wanted to shake Matthew and tell him to give up, to go back to his parents and take the easy route. But then he described the feeling of losing himself in his art. And I'd remember why he couldn't do that. It's like he said, that alternate version of himself might be financially stable, but would he be truly alive? Plus, with how viscerally he was rejecting the idea of being a lawyer, I think it's better for his health too. that he stays the route he knows he should be going with. This story really made me think about how we define success. Is it about having a fancy job title and a fat bank account? Or is it about waking up every day and doing something that fills you with purpose, even if it means struggling financially? I don't have any easy answers, but I do know that Matthew's story is going to stick with me for a long time. It's a reminder that life isn't always black and white, that sometimes the right path is also the hardest one.
And now, guys, we will move on to the second story of the video. Please like the video if you have enjoyed it so far. The story starts like this.
Caught my husband in a compromising position with his secretary, so I planned the ultimate revenge. I always considered myself level-headed and rational, not prone to dramatic outbursts or schemes. But when I caught my husband of 15 years in a compromising position with his young, attractive secretary, something inside me snapped. Levi and I met in college. I was a shy, bookish pre-law student, and he was the charming business major who always seemed to be at the center of every social gathering. We were an unlikely pair, but somehow we clicked. Levi brought me out of my shell, encouraging me to loosen up and enjoy life. I helped ground him, providing the stability and support he needed to focus on his studies. After graduation, we both landed entry-level jobs in the city. I was working as a paralegal while studying for the LSAT, determined to pursue my dream of becoming a lawyer. Levi started in the mailroom of a large corporation, but quickly began climbing the ranks. He had a natural talent for networking and office politics that served him well. We got married 2 years after college in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. I still remember how handsome Levi looked in his tuxedo, his eyes shining with love as we said our vows. We were young and in love, ready to take on the world together. The first few years of marriage were blissful. We worked hard during the week and spent our weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants and planning for our future. We talked about having children, buying a house in the suburbs, all the typical dreams of newlyweds. But as Levi's career began to take off, things started to change. He was working longer hours, attending more business dinners and weekend retreats. I was proud of his success, but I also missed the carefree guy I'd fallen in love with. Still, I told myself it was just a phase. Once he reached a certain level, things would calm down. Meanwhile, I had put my own career aspirations on hold. With Levi's increasing salary, we decided it made more sense for me to stop working and focus on supporting his career. I threw myself into being the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties, attending charity galas, always looking impeccable on Levi's arm at company events. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't miserable. We had a beautiful home, took luxurious vacations, and wanted for nothing materially. But sometimes late at night, I'd find myself wondering what might have been if I'd pursue my own dreams instead of sublimating them to Levi's. As the years went by, I started to notice subtle changes in Levi. He became more distant, more irritable. At first, I chalked it up to the stress of his job, but then I began to notice other things. He started guarding his phone, always keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. He was showering as soon as he got home from work, something he'd never done before, and there was a new cologne lingering on his shirts, one I hadn't bought him. I tried to ignore these red flags to convince myself I was just being paranoid, but the pit in my stomach grew with each passing day. Finally, about 6 months before D-Day, I confronted him. "Is there something going on, Levi?" I asked one night as we were getting ready for bed. "You seem different lately." He barely looked up from his phone. "What do you mean? Everything's fine." I pressed on. "Are you having an affair?" That got his attention. He looked up, his eyes wide with what seemed like genuine shock. "What? Of course not. How could you even think that?" He then launched into a long explanation about how stressed he'd been at work, how there was a big merger coming up that was taking all his energy. He promised to make more time for us to reconnect. And for a while he did. He came home earlier, took me out on date nights, was more attentive in bed. I wanted so badly to believe him that I pushed my doubts aside. But then came that fateful Tuesday evening in late September. I had decided to surprise Levi by bringing dinner to his office, knowing he'd been working late nights for weeks on the merger deal. As I approached his corner office, paper bag of his favorite Thai takeout in hand, I heard muffled voices and giggling through the frosted glass door. My stomach dropped as I recognized the high-pitched laugh of Natalie, Levi's new secretary. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Part of me wanted to turn around and pretend I'd never come, to preserve the illusion of my happy marriage for just a little longer. But a stronger part of me needed to know the truth. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door. The sight that greeted me will be forever seared into my memory. Levi had Natalie bent over his mahogany desk, her tight pencil skirt hiked up around her waist. His pants were around his ankles as he thrust into her from behind. They were so caught up in their illicit encounter that they didn't even notice me at first. "What the hell is going on here?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Levi's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock and fear. As they met mine, Natalie let out a little shriek and scrambled to cover herself. "Janet, this isn't, I can explain," Levi stammered, hastily pulling up his pants. I didn't wait to hear his pathetic excuses. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving the bag of now cold Thai food on the floor of his office. As I made my way to the elevator on shaky legs, I heard Levi calling after me, but I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. Somehow I made it back to our house without crashing, though my vision was blurred with unshed tears. How could he do this to me, to us? We'd been happily married for 15 years, or so I thought. We'd built a life together, weathered ups and downs. I'd supported him as he climbed the corporate ladder, cheering him on at every promotion, and this was how he repaid me? As the initial shock and grief began to subside, anger started to take its place. Levi had betrayed me in the worst way possible. He'd made a fool of me, probably laughing behind my back with his little tart of a secretary. Well, I wasn't about to let him get away with it. I spent that night tossing and turning, my mind racing. By the time my alarm went off the next morning, I had the beginnings of a plan. Levi had texted and called dozens of times, but I ignored him, let him stew in his guilt for a while. My first step was to call in sick to work. I needed time to get my ducks in a row before confronting Levi. Then I made an appointment with the best divorce lawyer in the city for later that afternoon. Next, I headed to the bank and withdrew half of our joint savings, moving it to a new account in just my name. I also canceled our joint credit cards. After that, I paid a visit to a private investigator I'd found online. I explained the situation and hired him to gather evidence of Levi's affair. I had a feeling this wasn't a one-time thing, and I wanted proof. The PI assured me he had had photos, videos, and phone records within a week. My last stop of the day was the lawyer's office. The lawyer I'd found had a reputation as a shark in divorce court, which was exactly what I needed. I laid out everything that had happened, and she nodded along sympathetically. "I'm so sorry you're going through this, Janet," she said. "Unfortunately, it's all too common. But the good news is we have a strong case here. Infidelity isn't technically grounds for divorce in our state, but it can impact things like alimony and division of assets. And from what you've told me about your husband's position at work, we may be able to argue that his affair constitutes misuse of company resources." I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time since yesterday. So, what do we do next? She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. First, we gather evidence. Your private investigator will be a big help there. In the meantime, I want you to act as normally as possible around your husband. Don't let on that you're planning anything. We want to catch him off guard. I left her office with a game plan and a renewed sense of purpose. Levi was going to rue the day he ever looked at another woman. When I got home that evening, Levi was waiting for me. He jumped up from the couch as soon as I walked in, his face a mask of remorse. Levi immediately launched into a long, rambling explanation about how the affair with Natalie had just happened and didn't mean anything, how he'd make a terrible mistake and would do anything to make it up to me, how much he loved me and our life together. I let him talk himself out, then simply said, I need some time to process this, Levi. I'm going to stay with my sister for a while. His face fell. How long? I shrugged. As long as I need. Don't try to contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready to talk. With that, I went upstairs and packed a bag. Levi watched helplessly from the doorway as I gathered my things. I love you, he said softly as I brushed past him. I paused at the top of the stairs and looked back at him. You should have thought of that before you stuck your dick in your secretary. The hurt and shock on his face as I walked out was deeply satisfying. I didn't exactly go to my sister's, of course. I checked into a nice hotel downtown instead. For the next week, I focused on self-care and gathering intel. I got a massage, had my hair done, and treated myself to some new clothes. I also had long talks with my closest friends, finally unburdening myself about Levi's betrayal. Meanwhile, my private investigator was hard at work. When we met up the following Tuesday, he had a thick file of evidence for me. Your husband has been carrying on this affair for at least 6 months, the PI told me. I have photos of the meeting at various hotels, as well as time-stamped security footage of them entering and leaving your husband's office at odd hours. I also obtained records of hundreds of texts and calls between them, many of an explicit nature. I flipped through the photos, my jaw clenching as I saw Levi and Natalie in various intimate embraces. There was even a shot of them kissing in the parking garage of Levi's office building. The final nail in the coffin was a receipt for a diamond necklace Levi had bought Natalie using our joint credit card. The next phase of my plan involved a bit of social engineering. I casually reached out to some of Levi's co-workers' wives, women I'd gotten to know over the years at company events. Over coffee and cocktails, I slowly began dropping hints about Levi and Natalie's suspicious behavior. I didn't outright accuse them of anything, but I planted seeds of doubt and suspicion. I'm probably just being paranoid, I said to Levi's boss's wife. But have you noticed anything odd between Levi and his new secretary? The way they look at each other sometimes makes me a bit uncomfortable. She frowned. Now that you mention it, I did see them dancing rather closely at the holiday party last year, but surely Levi wouldn't. I mean, you two always seem so happy. I sighed dramatically. I thought we were, but he's been working such late hours lately, and he's been so distant. I just don't know what to think. By the time our lunch was over, I could practically see the gears turning in her head. I knew she'd be talking to her husband about it that very night. 2 weeks after D-Day, Discovery Day, I felt ready to confront Levi. I'd moved back home a few days prior, making a show of working things out for the benefit of the neighbors. Levi was walking on eggshells around me, bending over backwards to be attentive and loving. One evening, as we were eating dinner, a meal I'd carefully prepared, complete with candles and wine, I decided it was time to lower the boom. So, Levi, I said casually, taking a sip of wine, how's Natalie doing? Has she been enjoying that new diamond necklace you bought her? Levi choked on his steak, coughing and sputting. What? I don't know what you're talking about. I smiled coldly. Oh, I think you do, just like you know about the dozens of hotel rendezvous, the late nights at the office, the hundreds of explicit text messages. Levi's face had gone pale. Janet, I can explain everything. Save it, I cut him off. I have proof of everything. Photos, videos, phone records, credit card statements. So, unless you want me to take all of that to your boss, not to mention your mother, I suggest you listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. For the next hour, I laid out my terms. I wanted a divorce, obviously, but not just any divorce. I wanted the house, the cars, and a significant portion of our assets. I also wanted Levi to come clean to his company about misusing resources to conduct his affair. If you agree to all of this, I said, I'll keep things as quiet as possible. If not, well, I'm sure the board of directors would be very interested to see these photos of you and Natalie going at it on company property. Levi looked like he was about to be sick. You wouldn't try me, I said evenly. You seem to have forgotten who you're dealing with, Levi. I'm not some meek little housewife you can walk all over. I'm the woman who helped you practice for every job interview, who edited all your big presentations, who played the perfect corporate wife at every mind-numbing company function. I'm smarter than you, and I'm sure as hell smarter than your barely legal mistress. He flinched at my harsh words. Janet, please, I know I messed up, but I love you. We can work this out. Go to counseling or something. I laughed humorlessly. Oh, Levi, it's far too late for that. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and negotiations. True to form, Levi tried to weasel his way out of my demands at first, but every time he or his lawyer pushed back, I simply had my own lawyer produce another damning piece of evidence. It didn't take long for him to realize he was beaten. In the end, I got everything I wanted in the divorce settlement: the house, both cars, and 75% of our assets. Levi also agreed to confess to his bosses about the affair and inappropriate use of company resources. I made sure to time everything perfectly. The day Levi was set to meet with the board of directors, I had someone leak some of the tamer photos to a few key gossips in Levi's office. By the time he arrived for his meeting, the whole company was buzzing with speculation. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. From what I heard later through the grapevine, it was brutal. Levi was fired on the spot, his reputation in tatters. Natalie was also let go, though she tried to play the victim card. As for me, I wasted no time in starting my new life. I sold the house, too many bad memories, and bought a sleek condo downtown. I also decided to go back to school and finish the law degree I'd put on hold when Levi and I got married. It was challenging to be a student again in my 40s, but also incredibly rewarding. The first few months after the divorce were tough. Despite everything Levi had done, there were moments when I missed him desperately. We'd been together for so long that being alone felt strange and uncomfortable, but I threw myself into my studies and my personal growth. I started seeing a therapist to work through my feelings of betrayal and inadequacy. She helped me realize that Levi's affair wasn't a reflection on me or my worth. It was his weakness, his failure. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my self-esteem. I also rekindled old friendships that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. I joined a book club, started taking yoga classes, and even tried my hand at painting. For the first time in years, I was doing things purely for my own enjoyment, not because they fit into some prescribed role of corporate wife. Law school was challenging but exhilarating. My life experience gave me a unique perspective that many of my younger classmates lacked. I found myself excelling in classes like family law and ethics, drawing on my own recent experiences with the legal system. As I approached graduation, I began to feel truly happy and fulfilled for the first time in years. I was proud of what I'd accomplished and excited about my future career prospects. The woman who had been content to live in her husband's shadow was gone, replaced by a confident, ambitious professional. I've got my revenge, yes, but more importantly, I'd reclaim my life and my sense of self-worth. Levi's betrayal had been painful, but it had also been the wake-up call I needed to make positive changes in my life. Now, 3 years later, I'm thriving. I graduated law school with honors and landed a job at a prestigious firm specializing in family law. I've made new friends and even started dating again, though I'm in no rush to remarry. Most importantly, I've learned to value myself and never again settle for less than I deserve. I've also found ways to give back. I volunteer at a women's shelter offering free legal advice to women trying to leave abusive relationships. It's incredibly rewarding work, and it helps me appreciate how far I've come. My relationship with Levi's family has evolved in interesting ways. His parents, who I was always close to, were initially devastated by our divorce, but as time passed and they saw how Levi's actions had affected me, they became supportive of my new path. We still get together for holidays sometimes, which I know drives Levi crazy. As for Levi, last I heard he was still struggling to rebuild his career and reputation. Natalie had long since moved on to greener pastures. Sometimes when I'm feeling particularly petty, I'd look at his sad LinkedIn profile and allow myself a small smile. But mostly I don't think about him at all. I'm too busy living my best life, the life I should have been living all along. And really, isn't that the best revenge of all? The experience taught me valuable lessons about self-respect, resilience, and the importance of maintaining your own identity within a relationship. While I wouldn't wish the pain of betrayal on anyone, I'm grateful for the growth it ultimately sparked in me. If there's one thing I want other women to take away from my story, it's this. Never lose sight of your own worth and potential. Whether you're in a relationship or not, always nurture your own dreams and ambitions, because at the end of the day, the only person you can truly count on is yourself. And to anyone out there who's been cheated on and feels like their world is ending, trust me, it gets better. You are stronger than you know. And this setback, painful as it is, can be the beginning of an amazing new chapter in your life. Don't let someone else's betrayal define you. Use it as fuel to become the best version of yourself. As for me, I'm excited to see what the future holds. For the first time in decades, the possibilities feel endless. And that, more than any revenge, is the true happy ending to my story. Here are my thoughts about the story. I mean, when I first started reading this story, I thought it was going to be your typical revenge fantasy, you know? Like, oh, he cheated, so I'm going to key his car and burn his clothes type of deal. But nah. Janet, she moved the mountain, seas, and heavens to have the last say. First off, can we talk about how Janet kept her cool when she walked in on Levi doing the horizontal tango with his secretary? I mean, I know people who would have lost their minds, started throwing staplers, maybe even tried to suplex the desk. But our girl Janet, she just drops the takeout and walks out with her composure. And then the way she methodically planned her revenge, it's like watching a masterclass in How to Destroy Your Cheating Husband 101. I was taking notes, y'all. You never know when information could come in handy. The private investigator, the lawyer, the subtle hints to the office gossip. It's like she was conducting an orchestra of chaos, and Levi was the poor, not really poor, but you know what I mean, guy who didn't even realize he was about to get his whole life remixed. But here's what really got me. Janet didn't just focus on tearing Levi down. She used this whole messed up situation as a springboard to level up her own life. Going back to law school in her 40s, that's gangsta. I can barely motivate myself to learn whatever new trends are popping up on TikTok this week. And this woman's out there becoming Elle Woods. And can we talk about that confrontation scene over dinner? The way Janet just casually drops the bomb about the necklace while sipping her wine. I felt that in my soul. It's like when your mom says, "We need to talk," and you know you're about to get verbally body slammed. Now, I gotta admit, part of me felt a tiny bit bad for Levi by the end. Dude lost everything, his job, his reputation, his marriage. But then I remember, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. He made his bed with Natalie, and now he's gotta lie in it alone. What really struck me about this story is how it shows that sometimes the best revenge isn't some grand dramatic gesture. It's living your best life and thriving despite what someone did to you. Janet didn't just get even, she got ahead, way ahead. I also love how Janet's relationship with Levi's family evolved. Like, imagine how awkward those holiday dinners must be. Pass the turkey, ex-mother-in-law. But it just goes to show that family isn't always about blood or marriage. Sometimes it's about the connections you make and maintain, even when things go sideways. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to go full Janet and orchestrate an elaborate revenge plan if you get cheated on, but I am saying that her attitude of, "I'm going to focus on myself and level up," is something we could all learn from. Whether it's a bad breakup, getting fired, or just life kicking you in the teeth, you always have the power to say, "This is not how things are going to end."
Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you again tomorrow.